Hi everybody, this is Denny with my YouTube channel, Why Is This True? And joining me today is Kevan, who contacted me a few weeks ago about maybe going public with some of the experiences he's had. As far as I'm aware, this is the first time Kevan's ever done a video interview or any kind of interview, as far as I know, where you've shared your experiences with, and this is as it relates to a secret space program. Is that right, Kevan?
Yeah.
Okay.
This would do with the SSP.
Okay. So first of all, I just want to thank you, Kevan, for choosing me out of all the people out there who do these kinds of interviews and videos and stuff. I'm very honored that you kind of picked me out of the pack to do this. So I really appreciate it.
Well, yeah. It was really that interview with Tony Rodriguez. Just the way you handled it, and you were very respectful and understanding, and I was really impressed by that. So I'm like, okay, I think it's time to reach out. So okay. Here it goes.
All right, here it goes. Yeah.
Okay.
So you could tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to talk today and what happened and we just take it from there.
Sure, sure. A little background on me. My name is Kevin. I'm 28 years old. I was born and raised in Ontario, Canada. And one of the main reasons I'd like to come forward is because I think there's a major gap in the whole SSP disclosure movement. There's a lot of focus on the UK and Europe and in America, and not a whole lot of Canadians have come forward. And geographically, if you look at us, we're right in the middle. We control the Arctic Circle. We border, Alaska and Russia and, the UK and off on that side. And so we're used a lot in military operations as logistical support and auxiliary forces. And a lot of UK guys and American guys will do like survival training and different kinds of training in Canada. And actually, the Canadian Forces, we're not the best equipped, but we're one of the best trained armies in the world in terms of the education our soldiers receive is like really top-notch education. It's just we're a socialist country and peacekeepers, and we don't at least on the surface we're not that well equipped. We're peacekeepers, but anyway, how that relates to SSP and myself is on November 12th, 2008. I was 19 years old at the time, and I was bicycling in a forest close to where I live called the Blair Forest. And I'm just bicycling along at about 3 p.m, sun and cloud kind of day. And it gets dark over me. And I get off my bicycle and I assume, it's a cloud overhead, blocking the sun. And I look up and like right just behind me, like right there is this white triangle, a perfectly shaped triangle craft, grayish white. It had a slight metallic kind of color, so not pure white, kind of off-white. And it was right over top of me, like completely silent. Moving like at a walking pace, because as I looked up and it was over me, I started walking my bicycle on a trail, and that's how slow it was moving because I was keeping up with it. And this lasted for about 4 or 5 minutes. And I remember kind of being in shock because the only thought that was really going through my head as I was walking underneath it was, how can an airplane be traveling that slow, that silently, and still create lift, like still have lift? That was just the first kind of knee-jerk like thought that was kind of on a loop in my head as I was walking. I had that same thought for like 4 or 5 minutes. And what's strange is like I was perfectly calm, and I did have a little flip phone on me at the time, and at no point did I think, oh yeah, like I'm gonna start taking pictures and all that. It was like I was kind of like just in shock, and I'm just like following it. And then I got to this clearing where it opens up into a field, and right when I got to the clearing, that's when it just like went straight up into the air and just vanished into the clouds. And I sat down, and I remember just like thinking for like an hour about what I had seen, and in my mind I was still kind of in shock. And I actually texted a friend at the time and said, I just saw the weirdest airplane. And I was still calling it an airplane. And it didn't really sink in until I got home later that night, and then it kind of wore off. That feeling wore off. And then I was like, oh my God, like that's not a conventional aircraft, at least not what they tell us they have, right? So I started researching it, and basically kind of recalling my memory, because I was looking at this thing for 5 minutes. I noticed that this craft, it wasn't all one piece. I saw a faint distinctions of paneling, just very faint, where it actually been joined into sections. And later on, I would find out that the Solar Warden faction was created in like the late 70s, early 80s. And the thing about Canada is we get a lot of the hand-me-downs from the U.S. and the U.K. and other countries and that are a part of NATO. We get a lot of the hand-me-downs, and I was able to kind of put it together that although I saw this craft in 2008, that's like a 25, 30-year-old craft and even it's much more advanced. Even that now, it's much more advanced than what they tell us they have. But compared to what the States has, it's like, it's like an old Tinker toy kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, like, it wasn't one piece; it was put together, and
Right.
yeah, and it was pretty incredible. But it's not that advanced, and it has to do with the Solar Warden faction. And as far as I know, I don't know anything about Dark Fleet. There's not a lot of information on that. That's why I found Tony's testimony really, really intriguing, because I think he's probably the only person who remembers that much about Dark Fleet, and you can't really find anything on them. But in terms of Solar Warden and my experiences, um, about 3 weeks later, first week of December, what happened was, as I was falling asleep at night, I was having out of body experiences where I'm lucid in the dream and I can control myself in the dream. And now I'm having not just the regular kind of dreams that you have where you're tired and your brain kind of heals itself, and it just kind of, you got little images and bits and pieces from past, what happened that week or a movie you watched. You know what I mean? Like, you got
Yeah.
those dreams,
Right.
but then there's the dreams where, like, you're in the dream and you're controlling yourself, and there's beings around you interacting with you, but you're in control of your light body.
Right. Lucid.
Totally lucid. And so it's starting to freak me out, because I'm like, every single night I'm like in this other reality and I'm lucid. And I started interacting with astral type beings, which I don't want to get into now. I want to stick to the external objective type stuff, but that's just an important point in terms of when I get into the blank slating. When it started to break down just 3 weeks later, every single night to this day, when I go to sleep, I'm completely lucid. And it just kind of trips me out, because there's all these books on how to lucid dream and how to astral project, and I can't turn it off. As soon as I fall asleep, I'm just like, boom, and I can control it. And at some point, not today, but at some point, I'll talk about my astral experiences and astral contact with benevolent beings. And but I want to stick to the SSP stuff today.
Okay.
And I do have just a little bit of a timeline here, just so I stay on point. Now it's December 2008 into January, February. And what happened? Yeah, let's get into what happened in North Bay. Okay, so March 2009, last week of March, I decide to go visit a friend up in North Bay. It's about 5.5 hours away from where I live in Cambridge. And the thing about North Bay is, and I didn't know this at the time, but there's a military base up there. And I get up there and they got like tanks everywhere and jets on stands, like old jets. And I start talking to my friends. They're like, oh, yeah, there's a military base. There's an airfield just outside of town. And, they do training on the lake and all that stuff. So I'm like, okay. And so I was staying in a hotel, and I motorcycled. I didn't motorcycle up there, but when I got up to North Bay, I found that bike prices were really cheap, because it was March and it was a small town. So I was able to pick up like an awesome little Kawasaki Ninja for like $1,500.
A 250?
500 EX
500?
500 in 89.
Cool.
89, a black one.
Yeah, I ride a Honda.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, my first bike was the Honda Nighthawk.
Okay.
Yeah, so nice. But yeah. So I'm riding around North Bay on.
And Tony's got a Harley.
Right. Yeah, that's funny. Funny, yeah.
So, all right. So that's the club.
Yeah, it's motorcycle club. Okay. Yeah. So I'm motorcycling around town, just kind of like checking out the sights and that. And after a couple of days, I do start to get the feeling that I'm being kind of watched and followed. But because I'm on a bike, I'm thinking, maybe it's like my cop radar, because
Yeah.
I'm going the speed limit, but not like all the time. So I'm like, okay, maybe I should just watch what I'm doing a little more. I probably just have some cops watching me. It's a small town, guy on a bike in March, and the roads were clear, but there was still snow on the ground. And anyway, so what happened was on March 29th, 2009, I have this feeling in my hotel room. I'm like, I just can't sleep. I have anxiety. I don't know why. But I'm so tired and it's so cold. I'm just like, okay, I'm not going to hop on my bike. I'm just going to go for a walk and see if there's like a coffee shop open or something because I can't sleep. I wanted something to eat. So I ended up just kind of leaving the hotel and just walking around. And I ended up on the main drag and I'm walking down the street. And right beside me, this person, a young man, like literally like appeared beside me. Like he stepped out of a vortex. He just blinked in, but he was physically there. And it happened so fast that I saw him out of the corner of my eye. And as I'm walking, I'm already like 2 or 3 like steps ahead. And I like do this and I like turn around. And before I describe what he looked like, he says to me, are you Divine Wheelie? And an important point I want to make is that usually when an ET is watching you, they come up with this like nickname for you that it's like an inside joke that only you're going to get. But if someone else was standing there, they'd be like, why did he call you that? But I knew what he meant, and it had to do with me just being very spiritual into like meditation and all that, and reading philosophy and history. So that's like the divine part, being spiritual. And then the wheelie part is me practicing and trying to do wheelies up and down that road, for the last couple of days. And that's why I thought maybe like cops were watching me. So divine wheelie. And as soon as he said that, I just knew, like an inside joke, I knew he was talking to me. And so I look back and I get really freaked out and I just kind of keep walking and I don't say anything. And then he says, he calls after me and says, don't excommunicate me. I'm a good boy. And he spoke in just like the weirdest grammar, like sentence structure. It's just he spoke English.
And this is audible voice.
Audible, yeah. He's physically standing there.
Not telepathy.
No, his mouth was moving. He was actually speaking.
Right.
And I'll describe what he looked like now before I go on. He was about 5 feet tall. He looked basically, because I was younger then, he looked like my age now, maybe 28, 29, close to 30. But one thing that was strange was his skin was completely white, like not like any, there's a pale person here, but then this was like, you could, like someone painted him white. Okay. And he had I noticed he didn't have any logos or anything on it. He was wearing like a magenta, almost a purple colored leather coat with white sleeves, kind of like jeans, but they had like a shimmer to them, like some, you could tell, really expensive looking jeans, but again, no logos, no branding, and a white baseball cap, just white. And his ears were covered, and he had you could just see a little bit, just very, very short brown hair, just cut like almost like a Vulcan, like Spock, like straight across and then down, very very, not your usual stylish haircut, very boxy haircut. He had a very small hooked nose, like a just
Roman?
this tiny, kind of like an Arabic looking nose, with like that slight bend, but just miniature, like very small. But big brown eyes that were like way too big, like double, like almond shaped eyes, but like double the size of even mine, like quite large, with like this tiny hooked nose, and no upper lip, and just a bottom lip, no upper lip at all. So like just like little features like that. When I looked at him and he said, "Don't excommunicate me, I'm a good boy," and I looked at him, I really kind of like took him in for a second. I just instinctively, like my body, my animal, I could tell that he just didn't belong. Like this sensation, I've never felt this with any other person. And I've been around some rough dudes, riding motorcycles on Friday the 13th to Port Dover and stuff. And like I've been around biker dudes, and like, I know how to keep my cool, and like, whatever. You got like the macho guys around you, just kind of keep your cool, you be respectful and all that. No, this was like this little man, this boy, basically just looked at me, and instinctively I I was already freaking out. It was like survival mode, and I was like, fight or flight, and I chose flight, and I started walking like as fast as I could up the hill towards this coffee shop that luckily was open. and I'm like, okay, I'm going inside. I'm going to try to wait this out. I hope hopefully it doesn't follow me. And this coffee shop had like on three sides glass walls, and there's a Catholic church across the street, and there's some seniors in there waiting to go into this was on a Sunday, waiting to go into an early service, but they were having like their tea and coffees and doing that. And so I go in there and I sit down and I order a tea, and I'm waiting, and where I'm sitting, because he's down there, I don't even want to turn around. I'm just sitting, drinking my tea, just like I don't even want to look back because I'm hoping to God this thing doesn't follow me. And next thing I know, I'm thinking is back there. Somehow he's already like up ahead, and he comes around the corner because he had like circled the building. He comes like right into my field of vision, see him through the glass, and he's walking and he's like looking at me, just like never taking his eyes off me, and he's just walking by the glass. And then he kind of like slowed down his walk and just kept like looking at me all the way until he comes inside. The second he walks inside, the power turns off and the power turns back on. Okay. And I'm like, oh my God, like what is happening right now? And so he walks over to my table, and you got to understand at this point, I'm kind of like freaking out. So I just asked him, like, what was that? Like what just happened? Because of the power. I knew he was like responsible for it. And just this blank stare, like he may have blinked once or twice, but it was like he never blinked. And it's just like blank stare, and then a very bland, monotone voice. He just says, "It's my angel heritage." And I'm like, okay, now this is getting like really, really weird. And he starts walking towards my table, and I say to him, no, you can go sit over there. And I point to like a table across from me. And he does. He goes over there and he sits down, and but he's just staring at me. And and we're just like having this like staring contest, and I'm trying to keep my cool, but I kid you not, I'm like actually shaking now. And I'm trying to show the fact that I'm not shaking. And eventually this waitress lady comes over and she says to him, you need to order something to be in here. And he kind of just like, because he was really staring at me, and then he just kind of looks up, and it's like he broke his little trance he had over me, and he just kind of like looks up, and he was kind of like in a daze, like he was at a loss. Now he's wearing very, very fine, nice clothing, but it's like he didn't have a wallet, he didn't have ID, he didn't have anything. Just kind of like got confused for a second. And for some reason, my fear in that moment, I actually felt sorry for him. And I said, it's okay, he can have a tea on me. And then as soon as I said that, he came right over and sat down right across from me. And then the waitress came over and brought him a tea. And now my favorite tea is green tea, white tea. And so I had already ordered that. And she brought over the same thing. But I never said, I just said he'll have a tea. I never said what kind of tea. And this is where he started like pulling things out of my mind. And he said, green tea, white tea. Like as soon as she said it down, like he knew green tea, white tea. I'm like, okay. And then what happened at that point is he just started talking about how both my grandfathers passed away when I was 10, 3 weeks apart. And he knew exactly how they died. And I'm just kind of like, I'm frightened. I'm trying not to cry. So I'm like shaking, trying to keep my cool. And he knew, he just kind of kept talking, like almost like a psychic, just giving you this reading. But it wasn't, it was just really personal stuff. Like he knew my favorite video game I played as a kid. He mentioned that. He mentioned the game was a computer game called StarCraft, and one of the races, Protoss, looks like the Greys. And he mentioned how he's like, don't you notice like Protoss, isn't that like the Greys? And like, and then so I decided, because he knew it was almost like a psychic, I decided just to ask him a question. And at the time, I was really into the Alex Collar Andromedan information because of what the things I was remembering, the things I'd been through. I was trying to focus my attention more on the benevolent contact and the concept of a contactee instead of an abductee. And the MyLab thing, I wanted to focus my attention because I was having some positive astral experiences. So I'm like, oh, maybe I can initiate some contact with the Andromedans or whoever, a benevolent race, for mentorship and that. And so I asked him, I'm like, well, what do you think of Alex Collar? And in that like blank monotone voice, he's just like, Alex Collar is in league with Satan. And I'm like, just thought to myself, like, well, no. I mean, like, the guy's like one of those like loving, like understanding, nicest guys ever, in my opinion. And his information is awesome, and he's just awesome. And so I'm like, okay. And then that's when he started just mentioning, he knew like certain friends I had, and he just started saying really negative things about them, like really offensive things. Like I had a close friend who is a hunter, and he's an older guy, he's a hunter, and he's taught me like some survival training and that, and he's like a good protective energy. I really trust this guy, nice guy. And he knew his name, and he said that, he said like, oh, that guy's gay, you should stay away from him, and stuff. And little does he know, I'm like, well, I don't really care if he's gay or not. I mean, he's my friend. So, but he was just using these buzzwords, like these little words to try to get at me and make me insecure in my knowledge of my friends and my family and even people I had looked up to, like Alex Collar, saying that he was in league with Satan, because he could tell I'm in this fearful state, so I might be susceptible to like tip over in my mind and have like a freak out about what I think I know. And another thing I want to mention, just in terms of the sensation, as this is happening, he's looking into my eyes, and the sensation, this has to do with the entrainment, I later found out. At this time, I hadn't come over, I hadn't come across Dan Birch's testimony when he talks about the MIB experience that followed him home that one night. And I hadn't come across that yet. Later on, when I did come across that, I admit I kind of had a little bit of a breakdown watching it, because I'm like, I'd never really understood what happened to me in North Bay until I watched that video a couple years later. And I think it may have been somewhat of the same experience. I think this may have been a MIB. And because he did kind of...
MIB standing for Men in Black?
Men in Black. And there's two types. There's the regular humans that try to, scare you away from stuff, and just kind of, they're almost like they knock on your door and they just kind of ask you questions, but they're just humans. And then there's like the real ET thing walking around, they're Dan Birch never really specifies what they are per se, but they are wearing a suit, as bizarre as that sounds, to deal with our current atmosphere and pressure and temperature. They are wearing a suit of some kind, and it's a human skin-looking suit. And he even, he's a microbiologist. He actually speculates that it's the skin of a dead human. And what's strange about this is, like, I could just tell he did not belong. And it was like, if you've ever been to an open casket funeral and you see like someone that's really, their skin just doesn't, it's not alive anymore, it just doesn't look right. Like this person, he just didn't look right. Did
the waitress notice his odd appearance?
That's a good question, actually. I should mention that. The seniors were kind of in their own little world and not doing that. But the waitress, as soon as he spoke to her, like at first she was like, oh, you got to buy something being here kind of thing. The second he looked at her and kind of like talked to her, she just kind of went into this trance. And what I noticed was that's what he was trying to do with me. The sensation was, I'm sitting there, and as he's looking into my eyes, I feel like I'm being pushed back. Like I could fall over into my chair, and it's actually taking every ounce of strength I have just to sit upright and stay awake. The sensation was like I was going to faint. And this little voice in my head said, stay awake, stay awake. If you faint and hit the floor, like it's not going to be okay. Like you might stroke out. You might, that survival instinct was like, stay awake. And so I'm like fighting him. It's like a battle of wills. And like, I'm just like looking him in the eye, and I'm holding my own, but I'm shaking, and it's like taking everything I have, and he's just perfectly calm. His presence was so powerful for such a little guy. His presence, I've never felt to this day a presence like that in my entire life. It was so strong, it could literally knock you over. I felt nauseous, like I could throw up. I just wanted to faint. And so I'm fighting him mentally, and eventually, after he starts talking about all these little details about my life, he basically he kept saying two things. He kept saying, "Can I go with you?" And I knew what he meant. He wanted to go back to my hotel. He wanted me to take him back to my hotel where I was staying. He kept saying, like, "Can I come? Like, can I go with you? Where are you going? Where are you know?" And then the other thing he kept asking in different ways was, if you could have anything, like anything in the world, like what would it be? And I'm not a religious person. I grew up in an atheist household, so I don't have that religious programming. But what was eerie is it did remind me of the whole devil thing, like trying to like sell your soul, like, tell me your wish and let's go from there, kind of thing.
Matthew 4:8.
See, I don't.
Matthew 4:8. Okay, so after Jesus is in the desert for 40 days, Satan takes him up to a mountaintop, and he shows him all the kingdoms of the world. And he says, you can have all the kingdoms of the world if you bow down and worship me. And the reason I remember that, I used to study apologetics, okay? But to me, that was like a very poignant discovery for me, because at the same time I was doing that, I was reading stuff like G. Edward Griffin's The Creature from Jekyll Island, and figuring out, like, well, what was really the power structure of the world? Why are these things happening the way they're happening? And so what that told me is that, okay, what can Satan offer the kingdoms of the world to Jesus if he doesn't own them already? And so to me, that was like, okay, that's sure proof that Satan is the owner of man's governments of the world. It made total sense to me, because you could judge the governments by their fruits: war, oppression, death. All the trappings of government, the state. And I go, okay, this is kind of lining up. So
they are Luciferian materialists. I mean, call them what they are, but yeah.
So anyway, so when you say you had this connection, I do too, and I can tell you it's Matthew 4:8, and it's actually, I think it's in the Gospels. There's actually that episode is described in two different books. I know Matthew's one, I can't remember the other one. But anyway, for you Bible studiers, which not too many watch my channel, but there's a few out there, they could probably point out what the other passage is. But I think that's what you're referring to.
Well, isn't it interesting that I don't have any religious programming whatsoever, scientific household, and yet even as an atheist at that point, in terms of religion at least, I got this eerie vibe that I'm like, is he like a fallen angel? Is he actually like some kind of like demon or satanic being here? In the case where because I knew instinctively, because I'll get into that later, my role in the SSP as like an intuitive empath. So I'm reading him as well, and I can tell that when he's saying like, oh, if you want anything in the world, like he wants me to say something like, oh, I wish I was a pilot, or I wish I could race motorcycles, or whatever. And then I knew that if I said that, just as soon as I said it, the game was over at that point. I already lost, like I would enter into some kind of soul contract with him, or some kind of attachment, like there'd be a cord between us or something. Right. So I do not even to bite. But what was happening is, as he kept asking that, the feeling is getting stronger and stronger, and I'm starting to realize I can't hang on too much longer, and I need help. And ironically enough, there's the Catholic Church across the street, up on a hill there, up on Algonquin Drive, right up on the hill. And it's like, of course, Catholic churches, they always build their churches on like the highest hill in the land, and their steeples always have to be the highest for some reason. Anyway, so it's like the biggest church in North Bay. And by this point, they're opening the doors and letting in this early congregation. And so I say to him, I'm like, all I want is to go to church. And that's my request, which isn't like a thing. It's just, let me go to church. And I think I'm like, in terms, I'm like, I think I'm safe by asking, let's just say, I'm not, obviously it's not the devil, but it's an ET, but asking a demonic fallen angel type dude, like, I think that's pretty safe if my wish is to go to church, right? So he agrees, and we walk over, and again, he won't like leave me alone. He's right beside me, and he follows me up the steps, and this is where it gets really bizarre. The priest is shaking everyone's hand and saying something like peace be with you, the greeting, as is shaking everyone's hand. Now we get to the priest, and instead of shaking hands with him, this guy says, I'm with the deceased. And the second he says that, the priest also kind of gets that like blank trance like stare, and he just leaves the front of the church and marches us down the center aisle over to a roped off section at the front of the pews where the choir is meant to sit. After they come in and do their thing, the choir sits down, and then there's the first row. So he doesn't even, like, you know what I mean? Like, he puts us off into this roped off section, and like, I think this is like the second or third time I'd ever been in a church. I had attended some weddings, right? But like, so I'm just like, but I could tell him like, well, this is kind of odd. And then so we talk a little bit more, and because the service is about to begin. And one thing he says to me, so I ask him what his name is. And he doesn't tell me his name. He says, I want to rename myself Gabriel. That was his response. He didn't, so I never found out his name. He just said, I want to rename myself Gabriel. And then right before he left, he turns to me and he says, and this has to do with a past life. He says, your name was Michelle and you were murdered. And then he just stands up and he walks like across like the altar there, and there's like an organ, and he walks like over the altar behind the organ, and I hear him go out the back door. So he didn't disappear. There was a back door and I heard him go out, but he just left. Like who does that? Like, who walks like around the organ and around all the stuff at the front of the church and goes out like basically a fire exit that, you know, didn't have a fire alarm, but it must have been a fire exit. And that's basically where it ended. In order to feel safe, I just stayed for the whole service just to feel safe, and it lasted for a while. And then after that, to be perfectly honest, I called my mom to come pick me up. Called my mom. I was 2009. I think I was 21. 21. Yeah, I was born in 88. So somewhere in there. Sorry. It's just bringing all that up. But yeah, I called my mom for help.
Wow.
Yeah.
So of course, I'm going like, well, what happened to the motorcycle?
Oh yeah, that was like, you know, my mom, my dad came up, and basically they just took me home that day, and the weather wasn't good. It got into some snowy weather. I couldn't ride it back, so we ended up coming back up a couple weeks later. I left it in the hotel parking lot, and they just called the hotel and said, sorry, my son has to leave his motorcycle due to bad weather. He can't ride it home. Can you leave his bike? They're like, yeah, sure, no problem. And then we just came up with a friend a couple weeks later with a truck, and we just grabbed it, and that was it. Okay. Yeah.
So it doesn't have a happy ending.
Yeah, I was okay. I called my mom for help, and I was okay. Mom and dad. But
I don't know. I should make fun. It's something, an experience like that has got to be pretty profound. I mean, and you've had a few years now to kind of like digest this, and
yeah, and my heart's racing right now. Just I might have to. Here, I got some water. I might have to just take a breath here. And
okay, yeah.
Every time I tell this story, it's just a little much, honestly.
Yeah.
But that's the hardest story for me to tell. Actually, the rest is not as emotional for me. I've kind of dealt with everything, but that was just such a vivid experience, because that again, I didn't really know what I knew was very strange, very odd. I knew he didn't belong. Things were going through my mind was like, was he a fallen angel? Was he a demon? Was he an alien? I didn't really know. And then about a year later, I came across Dan Burch's testimony on Project Camelot, and in part 3, when he actually talks about his MIB experience following him home, and just the way he describes him, the behavior, the mannerisms, all that, I I almost had a little breakdown watching it, like tears, and I'm just shaking again like I was in North Bay, and it just brought all that up, and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
I mean, it's probably akin to like going to the dentist and getting the gas and having that feeling of losing control of yourself, and it's like you want to stay but you can't. You're falling back and you lose consciousness. It's like, and so you're with somebody who has that effect on you, and you've never been with anyone who has the effect of you like a strong narcotic drug, like just taking control of your consciousness where
that's a good way of putting it. It's like
yeah,
it's like the feeling of being like dosed. It's like
yeah,
you know, and you don't know, like you don't realize that someone put something in your drink, and you're just kind of
right,
like confused. Yeah, it was kind of
yeah,
like that. Yep.
roofie, yeah, like a roofie
Yeah,
kind of thing, yeah.
exactly.
So were you able to discover anything about the past life when you were Michelle?
Um, yeah, I ended up doing a past life regression quantum hypnosis session with a girl in Toronto who actually trained with Dolores Cannon,
Oh, cool.
and was able to bring me into the somnambulistic state. But again, like that's something because that's very subjective. That if I ever talk about, I count that as like astral experience because
Mm-hmm.
that kind of goes into like viewing the past in my astral body and viewing that. But suffice to say, I guess I had a lifetime in New York City, where I was a woman and I happened to be murdered. And just as a little aside, what's strange is when my mom and dad brought me to Manhattan as like a 12-year-old, my little brother loved Manhattan, and we got to stay in the Plaza Hotel, where they filmed Home Alone, and like we're all excited. Well, he was excited, and I just was freaking out. I didn't want to go outside. I couldn't sleep, and I kept just saying like, I want to go home. I want to go home. Put me on a plane. And they're like, well, Kevin, like we, you're underage. Like we can't just send you home. Like you're gonna have to wait it out. Just stay in the hotel room. Like they didn't understand. I didn't understand. But I had like full blown anxiety in New York City when I went back there when I was like 12. But
Wow.
anyway, that's a separate thing.
Yeah.
I'll just go back to my timeline here so I don't lose where I am. Okay. Um, yeah. So after that, after the North Bay experience,
Kevin?
yeah,
Who do you call this person now? Like if somebody's referring to this being, what do you have a name for this being?
I guess I guess because he said he wanted to rename himself Gabriel, I could just refer to him as Gabriel at this point, just to give him a name for the
Yeah.
sake of, because I really don't have he never told me his true name.
So when you think of him, but you don't really think of his name. You think more of the experience and the feeling that you had around him. Is that
Yeah,
true?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
exactly. He's just a nameless.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah,
it's one thing in a lot of these accounts, where people have interactions with either spirits, disincarnate spirits, or ETs, where it's kind of like energetic interaction. A lot of times they seem not to have names, are almost like a foreign concept to them. Like they 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 identify themselves by their energy signature, which is conveyed to whoever's interacting with them. And I've always felt that that's the way that's a more typical, more common way of identification. It's like they have this energy signature, and that's what you
yeah.
go by. That's how you're going to recognize them in the future. Is that
That's
energy
that's
signature?
exactly how I always think of him. Just his energy was so unique and strong that I never bothered to
Yeah,
give him a name because yeah, just like what you said, he really stuck out, and yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And no further interaction with him then.
No, no, never saw him again. Never saw him again. I think the whole thing was he wanted to go back to my hotel room, and I do feel like as an intuitive empath, I know he had a lethal intent. He definitely had a lethal intent. Second thing is if I think he was connected to the military base there. That's just my I'm speculating, but there is a strong military presence there, and usually you don't have an ET with boots on the ground without the military, saying, yeah, okay, that's the whole point of Solar Warden is to protect our airspace. And as an aside, one of the reasons for the chemtrails is so that their craft show up on radar. So during a high threat day, they'll fly over, and it's a lot harder for their cloaking to work with certain frequencies like HARP to HARP, has many functions. Chemtrail, yeah, there's aluminum and there's nanotech and there's a soft kill program and genetic engineering, and all that side of it. There's multiple agendas with the chemtrails, but one of the main ones that at least the military knows about is it's a radar detection device. But I think even the military that aren't a part of the secret space program, even just the regular Air Force, and that, I think what they're told is that, well, it's for like incoming missiles. Like, if North Korea sends a missile to head towards Alaska or Toronto or whatever, it'll show up on radar a whole lot quicker with the chemtrails. But anyway, yeah. So okay, yeah. So after that, it took me about a year to kind of stabilize after that. Honestly, I had such bad PTSD from that experience that I was basically a nervous wreck. I admit I actually did seek out some psychiatric care. I told my family about the experience, and what's really awesome about my family, they're very understanding, but they agreed. This is what I love about my family. They said, we don't doubt what you went through, but we can see the way this experience has left you, and clearly you're not okay. So we got to make sure that you're okay. We got to deal with your anxiety and your sleeping issues and that. So yeah, I saw a psychiatrist, and it took me a year to stabilize, and I ended up taking some sleep medication to help me sleep at night and things like that. So, and I think that's just a responsible thing to do, to try to stabilize. And then, yeah, about a year later, when I was feeling good and strong again, this is in April 2010. This is another contact experience, but this is more of an ethereal. It wasn't a physical being. It started when I was meditating in a park, and basically I look over into the bushes and I can kind of see like a shimmer, like an aura, almost like heat, like when heat rises off the road, but it's in the shape of like this little being, and it's staying there. And I am sensitive to energy. That was one of my abilities when I was with the SSP, was being an empath. I could actually see energy, because different people in the program have different functions, and even some soldiers can't even see energy like some of the intuitive empaths. And sometimes you'll have like a sniper and with an intuitive empath that would be like, can actually remote view and see energy and be like, yeah, right over there. But anyway, so I see this shimmer, and I start to, with my mind's eye, I'm meditating. So my mind's eye, I see in my mind what the being actually looks like in the ethereal, and it's an iguanodon. It's an inner earth being. Like a little 3 foot tall, like an iguana, standing upright, but very intelligent, with big eyes, and it's trying to communicate with me telepathically. And it basically says, it kind of sends me on this little mission, and it says, okay, what I want you to do. And by the way, the reason why I went along with it is because even though it was a reptilian, technically, the iguanodons are actually a peaceful inner earth race. There's 6 or 7 reptilian type beings, at least on the planet, especially in the inner earth, and they're not all bad. Not all reptilians are bad. These iguanodons are actually peaceful. They must have that green ray chakra at least, and so he was really peaceful. Again, no name though. Not like, I guess they're not hung up on names. Again, he had an energy, and he kind of guided me out to this forest, and it took me like all day to get there, and I got there at night, and he said, like, telepathically, he's communicating with me. He's like, okay, build a fire now. So I built this big fire, and he's like, okay, sit down, stare into the fire. So I start staring into the fire, and it's at night now, and I'm just staring into the fire, and I start to get this like download, and I start to realize, and I start to get flashback memories of a lifetime on Mars, and basically what this inner earth being was trying to say to me was that one of my lifetimes, how I ended up on Earth in the first place was I had been a part of the Martian colony, and during that great cataclysm when they had that war with Maldek, which became the asteroid belt, and that catastrophe, and a lot of the beings from Maldek and Mars ended up reincarnating on the Earth to continue their karma. And so that was just like a little kind of divine experience I had in the forest with this being telepathically. And so that was just a little aside. I thought I should mention that because it does count as a contact experience. Do you want me to continue? Is there any questions or?
No, this is good.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess that, yeah.
One of the things that's going on here is that you now, from these experiences, you've been able to construct a timeline, which is something you mentioned earlier in our communication, and you've been able to determine that you were a member of the Secret Space Program, the Solar Warden fleet, or some contingent thereof. And so,
I'll get into that later.
Yeah, so however we want to go from where we're at now to that is fine. I mean, and we can split this up into multiple interviews or however is comfortable for you. We're up to about 50 minutes, but there's no reason why if you want to continue, let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm in the flow here. I'm just gonna take a little sip of water. I'm in the flow.
Okay.
It's actually easier than I thought this would be.
Okay.
So, okay. Yeah, and the reason why I'm going over all this stuff that happened to me after the Secret Space Program stuff is it kind of answers the question, like, why me? The context of who I am and my abilities, and because after they dropped me off, I had continue contact experiences, as I've described, and will continue to describe. So after this, the next experience I had was in September 2011. I went to France for 10 days, and stayed in a small town just outside of Troyes, and it was like beautiful countryside in that, and on like the fourth or fifth night, about midway in the trip, I had this dream, which I describe as like a psychic attack. And basically, I was back home in Canada, and I was looking up at the night sky, and there was all these black triangles with the three lights, but like lots of them flying around in the sky, and it was like a negative timeline. There was like an ET. It was a fake alien invasion. It was that whole one of the timelines where they're going to stage an alien invasion, which at this point I don't think is a probability. But in 2011, a lot of people were talking about maybe they're going to stage a fake alien invasion, which was the Nazis, the Fourth Reich plan eventually that was their little failsafe to get everyone to fall in line. If need be.
Right.
So I was kind of like watching that unfold, and then what happened was this gentleman walks up to me, brown hair, beard, middle-aged, again, really, like, I could tell by his energy, like, peaceful, loving person. He just walks up to me and he just says, "Kevin, right now you're being attacked by spirits." And the second he said that, I just jolted awake in my bed and woke up, and I realized that even though in my mind I was seeing, based on my belief system and my knowledge and everything, I was seeing this negative timeline, I was actually being fed upon by like kind of astral parasites, because the day before, or that day that I'd fallen asleep, I did something that I'm going to recommend people don't do, and that's when you're like in an old country like France, and there's like an old graveyard in the countryside, and it's all like locked up and chained up, and you can't get in. Don't hop over, because that's what I did, and I was because I do love history, and I wanted to see graves from like the 1600s or older. So I broke into this really old closed off cemetery that was completely blocked off, and I trampled around in there, and I disturbed the earth. I disturbed the beings that were resting there. And what I realized was, like, that was actually not an alien encounter I had. That was actually, for lack of a better term, like ghosts. Like literally, I went into a graveyard, I disrupted it. It was very old. People probably died. I mean, France has a very bloody history. They probably died in very horrific ways. And I just went in there like a tourist, trampling around, taking flash pictures, and no one had been in there for, God knows how long. And then sure enough, I go home, I fall asleep, I let my guard down, and I have this, like, basically my worst fear. They in my mind, that is my worst fear, is either a fake alien invasion or a real alien invasion. So I'm just like, and from that fear, they were literally feeding off of me until this being appeared like an angel and was just like, and told me exactly like what was happening. It's like, you're being attacked by spirits right now. So like, this isn't real. Snap out of it. Wake up, So I just thought I would mention that because when I got home.
How did you remove that?
How did I remove that?
Just
that's
by waking up?
Yeah. I just woke up. Once this person said that to me, it just clicked. It just snapped me out of the fear because I was like kind of caught up in the fear of watching it all unfold.
Right. So the fear goes away. They go away because they got no more food.
Exactly. Okay. I basically realized.
Game over.
Game over. Yeah. I realized because I admit, like I said, I'm always very, very lucid. And in the dream, like I was aware that I was dreaming, but I thought it was in the future, and I thought it was like a real, probable future. And then he was, and the whole point was like, no, this is an illusion. This is just based on your own fear. It's not actually the future. But what happened though after that, when I got home, in the last like I was there for 10 days, and then like a week or two went by, and this is near the end of September. I had another like I call this a manifestation. Because I woke up and I was lying in my bed, and I like look at the end of my bed, and there is this being standing there, this little like 3.5, 4 foot tall being, and I think it may have been a jinn. When I researched it later, just based on the description, it was completely naked, but it didn't have any private parts, but naked, and it looked like a goblin, but it had like tan skin. And one of the weird details, it had the black eyes and like the really long nose, and it had black hair, but the hair was soaking wet. And that just, I remember looking at it, and that was just such a strange detail that its hair would be like soaking wet, draped over its body, kind of long hair, and it had black eyes, black nose, and it had its hands like that, and just kind of smiled at me. And I looked at it, and it was like for like one full second, like one Mississippi. And then it blinked out, and I was already like fully awake, and so that was just like a weird little manifestation. I don't know if that was related to what happened in France or not, but then just to continue, this is where it kind of it segues back into the secret space program stuff. In October of 2011, basically I had a gray abduction experience. And what happened was I'm dreaming. Was it a dream? Was it not? I'm still not really sure, but I'll just describe it as if it were a dream. And I fall asleep, and then I realize that as I'm sleeping, that my body's paralyzed and I'm awake, and I can hear like it's hard to describe, some kind of clicking back and forth, and I become very aware that there's two beings kind of standing around me and kind of waving their hands over me, almost doing like Reiki or something, like kind of just waving their hands over me and doing these things. But then in my mind's eye, I'm able to, because my eyelids I can't even open my eyelids, but in my mind's eye, I'm able to remote view them and see them, and it's two tall grays, and they have me paralyzed so I can't move. And instead of giving into the fear, maybe it's because of what happened in France, I'm not sure, but like something just kind of snapped in me in that moment, and I got like really angry, and I used every ounce of strength I had, just like I did in North Bay. Like I summited up all my energy, and I slowly, like very slowly like this, just started rising up off the table. And as I'm doing this, I actually do get to open my eyes for a second, and I see them, and these two grays just kind of freak out because I wasn't supposed to do that, and I broke some kind of safety protocol, and they're like, oh my God, like what do we do? And then I got like zapped by something, and I heard this weird electronic sound that I can't even describe, almost like 10 different keyboards going all at once, like weird tones, like, and then boom, I'm just like back in my bed. Yeah, Yeah, and what's strange, just to continue with that, is after that, they left me alone for 6 years, until just recently in March of this year, on March 24th. Um, I was sleeping in the house I'm living in now, and I'm lying in my bed. And again, I'm just going to describe this as a dream because I was in like a dreamlike state. And I can hear like walking around in my house, and I live alone. I keep my doors locked, and because of what I've been through, I keep the place, like all the windows locked, everything's locked up. And I hear like two people walking around in my house. And at first I'm thinking, oh great, like someone's broken in, right? Like, so I'm lying in my bed thinking like, shit, like what do I do? And but then what I realize is that like I'm already out of my body. I'm already standing over in the corner of my room, and I look and I can see myself sleeping. So I'm like, oh, so this is one of my astral lucid dreams. Okay. So I go running out in my astral body, my light body. I go running out of my room, and there's three tall grays standing and at the bottom of the staircase, and they go shooting up the stairs, and I basically just summon up this energy, like I'm gonna shoot like an energy ball at them. Like seriously, I just summon up this, and it was all instinctual. It was happened so fast. Like I'm describing it slow because I'm actually trying to like visualize it again. But this happened in a matter of seconds. This whole thing, and like I just kind of summon up this ball of energy, and they just go running up the stairs, and they just go running up the stairs, and then I know once they get up the stairs, they disappeared and they were gone. And then at that point, I woke up in my bed. So I guess it's like an astral experience. But what's interesting about that though is because of the date of it. This was March 24th of this year in 2017. Something I just want to go back on in my timeline, this relates to SSP, is on March 25th, 2015 at 3:45 a.m. Because I stay up really late. I kind of try to go to bed around 4 or 5 in the morning for obvious reasons, closer to sunrise. And so I'm just kind of lying on, I was at my parents' house, and I was lying on this couch, and there's a glass sliding door going out to the backyard, and all of a sudden the yard just lights up, and I look up, and there's the triangle again, the white triangle, going a little faster this time, but still very slow, and it goes right over the house, and I can see it going, and then it disappears. And then I think to myself, I'm like, I wonder, like, I don't know why, it's like I knew, I'm like, I wonder if it's going to come back. And then this was at 3:45 a.m. and at 4 a.m. on the dot, sure enough, I see the lights coming back, and it comes right back. Okay. And that happened, in 2015 on March 20, I think it was, March 25th. It's strange to me because the next year, even though it was just on the 24th, that little experience with the Greys, like the dates almost lined up. It was like, it's like they flew over me that one year, and then in 2015, and then 2017, I had in the end of March there, and then like the North Bay thing is March 29th. And another point I just wanted to get across quick here is in 2016 as well at 3:45 a.m. and this is where I'm living now. And this was on the 24th in 2016. Same thing. Yard lights up, triangle goes over, I'm thinking I'm going to take a picture right this time, and so like I'm trying to get my phone, and like I run out onto the deck, and like it's already like kind of past the house, and then as soon as I get outside, it just takes off and actually broke the sound barrier. It made a sound. It didn't just streak off like, silently. Yeah. It actually went like a jet, and it was gone. And that again has to do with like the older tech of the Solar Warden craft, because that's like a 30-year-old craft. But anyway, sorry, I kind of jumped around there a little bit. I could have done that. Sorry, when I talked about the gray thing, it kind of scrambled my energy for a second. Sorry. But anyway, I do have some actual SSP memories that I wanted to get into. In terms of the timeline, the earliest one in terms of the actual timeline that I remember is we were underground. There was 16 of us, and we were in this. It looked like Mayan ruins. It was this like dark gray granite, and it kind of had a little bit of a shimmer in it, like it had a little bit of quartz in it, and it was all like cut with laser precision. And there, in the little room we were in, there was these like little side chambers cut out, and they had set up beds in there. And there were 16 of us, men and women. We were 21, 22 years old, and we were wearing these like dark gray jumpsuits, but they kind of had like a teal color worked into them, so not completely gray. It's kind of hard to describe the color. I've never quite seen that shade before, like ever again, but it was like a tealish gray. I was sitting beside this girl, and we were talking, and it was right before like lights out. So it was like we had like a minute or two. I don't exactly remember what we were talking about. She was blonde, blue hair, blue eyes, blonde hair. And anyway, the commanding officer walks in. He says, "Okay, lights out." So we got into our bunks on the beds there, and the lights went out. And then the memory changes. And actually, something I want to add is how I know the difference between an astral experience and a memory is I'm watching the memory as it's like it's a movie. So I am seeing myself from a third person perspective, just like I'm watching myself like I'm an actor in a movie. And that's how I know it's not in real time, and that's actually a memory, just to make that distinction. So I'm actually watching myself when I do have the flashbacks in the form of dreams, but like I just described, it's third person perspective. So I'm watching this all play out. The lights go off, almost like a transition, like a movie. When the lights come back on, we're all standing in the hallway outside of this chamber, and the commanding officer is there again. And I noticed that there's 3 of us missing. So now there's 13, and 2 guys and the girl that I was talking to is missing. So I asked, where did they go? Like, where are they? And he says, it's none of your business. Keep your mouth shut. And I actually wrote down what he said. I'm actually quoting him here. Because you don't know. You don't need to know where they went. It's none of your business. Fall in line and keep your mouth shut. That's exactly what he said. Sorry again. I'm already. My heart rate goes up when I talk about it. And then the dream just ends, and that's one of my earliest memories with the SSP that I can remember, like wearing the jumpsuit and that. And I think what happened, in my opinion, is that when they're training you and you have certain abilities, they like to test those abilities. So sometimes they'll grab a couple people with different abilities, pull them aside, test them, or put them onto like a special assignment, which is meant as like a testing ground. And I guess these people, because when he said that, I knew what he meant. It was like, the reason he told me it's none of your business, keep your mouth shut. It's because they didn't come back. They didn't survive. I just, as an intuitive empath, I knew like, okay, I'm never going to see those people again. They're gone. And like I got that distinct impression that they were dead. And that's one of my earliest memories. And then just moving up in the timeline, this is after training. This is when I was in a different uniform, and it was like a dark yellow uniform with different shades of dark yellow. And I'm not an artist, I can't really draw it, but it was just different shades of dark yellow. And what it was I was in this, again, underground, kind of like Mayan looking, but a much smaller chamber. And there's a stone table, and I'm sitting across the table from a long-nosed gray, tall gray, but this one had like a bump, and is looking at me, and they're telling me to interface, like to talk to it, but telepathically. So I it's kind of like the opposite of what happened in North Bay, because this thing, as scary as it looked, it was afraid. It was actually afraid, not of me, but because of the situation it was in. It was completely cut off, and I think it had to do with it being underground in the granite and everything. It just was completely cut off. They couldn't beam him. His people couldn't get him out of there. So he knew he was trapped and cornered. And so they're like, interface with it. So I am reaching into his mind, pulling things out. And so now I am talking out loud so the people can hear me, but I'm describing his thoughts to the people that are listening. And I basically describe how, and I think this is one of the genetic programs, one of the 22 genetic programs that are running. And I describe how basically humanity is a human farm. They consider it, this group, they call it Earth Inc. And we are just a workforce, a primitive workforce of like 7 billion people. And we're a commodity. Even just the surface level people, secular humanism is such a great commodity because we are building stuff on the surface for them too, in stages. And we don't really know it, and we're mining things for private corporations and like the ICC and all that.
Now you said secular. You just said secular.
Secular humanism. That's kind of what I would refer to people who just the honest, good-hearted, hardworking people that just don't have a clue, but
and that's valuable to them.
Yeah, because
the fact that they're secular.
Yeah, they're completely in their own little world, and that suits their needs perfectly. It's kind of like Animal Farm, that book. It's like whatever happens, you do not disturb the beast on the farm. That was the main thing I pulled from this being, was like, whatever happens, you do not disturb the beast on the farm. They are valuable as this workforce that they don't have a clue, but they got their morals. They got to provide for the families, and they have the right intention. And these are secular humanism, the average human on the street, they have good intentions. They just want to provide for their families. But, they kind of have their horse blinders on, just trying to survive. And that suits this group's needs perfectly. And that's what I was able to pull from him. And as I'm pulling this from his eyes were already really wide, but they somehow got a little wider. And he's just kind of like, how are you doing this right now? You're not, because I guess they kind of look at humans as like a spiritually shut down species, that's so like genetically modified and damaged and polluted, blah, blah, blah. That's like, how the heck are you able to read my mind? Shouldn't I be reading your mind right now? And it was just kind of like a role reversal there. And he was just, this being got even more freaked out. And that's basically where the dream ended. And then again, it kind of like cuts like a movie, goes black. And then all I see is myself in that like yellow uniform again. And I come off of I go up a couple levels. I get off this elevator, and it looks like a regular office. Like, it actually just looks like an office with desks and everything. There were tablets, like people had tablets on, but no desktop computers, just people on tablets. And I literally just set a tablet down on a desk, and that was just my personal little report on what happened. I mean, they recorded everything I said, and filmed it, but it was just my own little report. I just remember throwing it down on the desk and being like, okay, and that was after my training that they deemed that my role, and they called me an ET interface. And that was one of my roles. And so that's one experience. And just checking my timeline here. Okay. Unless you have any questions.
No, I was really interested that you use that terminology because it kind of corroborates a lot of the information that we're getting from the channeling series that I'm doing with Carl Mollison on my channel. And so it's just interesting. I mean, it's...
the Tony interview was the last one I watched, by the way. I didn't want to watch anymore because I didn't want to, you know what I mean? Like,
no, yeah.
Hear it.
Yep. I have, in fact, I encounter that quite a bit. People who don't want to be seated. They want to just go at it with a clean slate, and I respect that. I think that's good.
Basically, since I reached out to you and we set up the date for the interview, I haven't been keeping up to date with exopolitics. I haven't been, my Gaiam subscription I'm paying for, but I'm using it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, no, it's time to go within. And I was working on my timeline. I just didn't want to be seated with anything. So, yeah.
No, that's good. That's good. It takes a little bit of willpower, but it's probably a good way to go.
Yeah, I've been like 2 or 3 weeks kind of out of the know, I guess, because I like to keep really up to date on all this stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So the next experience I have, this is, I think, a fairly unique experience. It really sticks out in my mind. It's actually the most vivid. This is the most I know this happened. Um, I woke up, and this yeah. Okay, so I'll just get into it. I woke up and I was in a sick bay, kind of like in a Star Trek looking sick bay, except I wasn't with humans anymore. They were human looking, they were Nordic looking, and they were the Pleiaren group, pronounced that way, Pleiaren. I know the term Pleiadian gets tossed around a lot, but this was the group that's actually from Ira, and that's the plant that goes around Tegeta, and that's the group that contacted Billy Meyer. And I know it's controversial because because they deemed it a hoax or whatever, but those group of beings really do exist out there. And for whatever reason, my group, we had been involved in some kind of attack, and we were all like injured. And I guess we sent out a distress call, or we got rescued, and the Pleiaren group had decided to pick us up. And there are other human soldiers that were wounded and being treated. And when I woke up, I guess I'd been healed for the most part. I do remember they gave me like some kind of like tea, and it was warm, and I drank this liquid. And then as soon as I drank the liquid, they basically said, okay, like now let's try standing. And there was these two Pleiaren nurses, and they kind of helped me off the bed, and I was able to walk. And so they started just showing me around the sick bay, but also just making sure I can walk. And I started walking on my own, but they stayed real close. And as I'm walking down the hallway, just everything was curved. Like there's no straight lines like the way we make everything on a right angle. Everything was just kind of curved. And so we're going along, and then I kind of look into this like oval shaped room, and it's one of the female soldiers. And she's sitting on the edge of the bed, and she looks perfectly fine, but she's just like in shock. And I mean, at that point, like we already know about the stuff we're in it, so it's not like the shock from the ETs. She's just in her own personal shock. And there's again two female Pleiaren women standing beside her, nurses. And I asked like what's wrong? And they say she has to decide whether or not she's going to keep her baby. And I guess she was actually pregnant when she was injured, and she didn't know she was pregnant. And when they brought her aboard, they said, yeah, by the way, you're pregnant. And because of like the program and what she's involved in, she had to decide whether or not she was going to keep her baby. So that was just something I walked in kind of by accident on. And then they continued to show me along, and then we walked out to this it's like a park in the center of this craft. And there was a huge tree in the middle going straight up, and there was other small trees and bushes, and they even like had like landscaped hills. And in these little spirals and circles were a bunch of like young Pleiarens and a couple old ones teaching them things. And when I walked out there, it was very mixed emotions. Some of them, again, as like an intuitive empath, some of them were kind of happy and excited to see me and glad to see that, oh, like it's okay. Others were, because there were children present, others got really on guard, and they were just like, yeah, I don't know about this. And it was this kind of this mixed vibe. And then over from the tree, this Pleiaren gentleman comes down, and he's about 40, 45 years old, middle-aged looking. And he comes down, and he had, everyone was very blonde in that, but he had short, dark hair, but big, piercing blue eyes. And he walks over, and he basically says, okay, now let's see if you can climb the tree. So he brings me over, and he kind of is helping me up the tree, and I'm kind of like getting my strength back. And we climb to about the midway point, and he says, okay, I think that's enough. And why don't you take a look around? So I'm like looking around this park, and I can kind of see it's domed, and there's like a holographic sky, and there's actually, they had like mist, like they were making clouds, and like they're merely making it like, it wasn't just a hologram, there's actual like condensation in the air, and it was kind of like a greenhouse, like a really interactive greenhouse. And then all of a sudden this like silver metallic disc comes out, and it's like flying around the tree, and I'm like pretty close to it. And for some reason I say, kind of as a joke, I say like, oh, when do I get to fly one of those things? And then he just smiles, and he says, soon enough. And then that's all I remember. It kind of just goes black after that, and I'm still in the tree, and just that's what I can't remember past I just remember smiling, just being like, soon enough, maybe, we'll see, kind of thing. But yeah, and that's just the plea. I call that the plea in sick bay, and that was the most vivid ones I can remember. And kind of in closing, there's other things I'm starting to pull, like some memories are starting to bleed through, but I just felt like some of the other ones I really need to meditate on. And I'm only 28, and I think I remember quite a bit. And apparently it's really not until like 30 that it really starts to bleed through in the cases that I've looked at. But I do remember my debriefing in closing. This was interesting. I think this was on Earth. The impression I got was it was somewhere in Russia, and like Eastern Europe, Russia, up in the mountains. And it was like this hotel kind of, it was a facility. It was definitely a military facility, but it was very luxurious. It was like a hotel. And I remember being shown into this like banquet hall, like this dining hall with glass windows on each side. And you can see the mountains on either side because we were on like a mountain. And then you can see the mountain range on either side. And there were these gold letters on the wall and actually spelt out the name of the hotel or resort. But whenever I try to focus on it, it like kind of blurs. But I know in the background it was like what you would see at a resort in gold letters on the wall. It actually said the name of the place. And there's a gentleman sitting, a bald guy. He looked maybe 55 or 60, and glasses. And he was just sitting there, and he was going to debrief me. And this is just sorry. What's interesting about this is I know that if I have to answer all his questions correctly or they won't send me back home. So I'm very nervous. And so I decide, because I'm an honest person, I decide, okay, I'm just going to pour my heart out to this guy, and I'm going to tell him all my experiences, because at that point, I hadn't been blank slated, so I remembered everything. And literally, as I sit down, I'm about to start, and he telepathically says to me, "Don't." He's like, "Don't tell me." And he was referring to something in particular, and sorry, and it had to do with the Plearn sick bay. Anyway, so I'm like, so I left that part out, and because the thing about our government is they're really interested in those discs, those craft, and the true Plearn ones, they've never gotten one intact. They always have to back and engineer them, reverse engineer them. They actually don't even really understand how they work, believe it or not, like truly. So anyway, he instinctively said that he's like a white hat, and he literally saved my life, because if I had mentioned that I saw one of those things up close, and I think there might have been more to it. Maybe I did go for a little ride or something. He's like, leave that part out. So I told him all the rest, and then it was just okay, yep, and it was kind of like a little evaluation, and then I know that's like my last memory, because they flew us back and dropped us off and back where it started in the forest, the Blair Forest, November 2008 on the 12th. Yeah, so that's
okay. So you were with your bicycle, you're walking your bicycle, you were picked up, did you do like a 20 and back, you think, or something like that, or?
I don't know if it was actually 20 and back. I know it's unique about my case is I actually got picked up when I was 19. I wasn't picked up as a child. I have to mention that. I could have been. I've looked into it, and I think with the intuitive empaths is they're kind of in short supply, and they make exceptions for people who can actually interface with all kinds of ETs. And in terms of being a soldier or a technician in that's a little easier to kind of train someone who either joins the military or just has an inclination, is mechanically inclined. They can train someone like that.
Right.
It's like they kind of and this kind of relates to North Bay thing. They already knew my past lives, like that being that I interacted with the North Bay. I mean, they are the psychic army, and they know your past lives. They if you're a starseed, they track you, and then they try to figure out, it's like, okay, do we got like an empath here? Is this someone who, like an ET interface, someone who's actually able to communicate with these beings in a real,
Yeah,
So
it goes back to this idea that we're starting to get a better grip on. It's not farming humans for the purpose of loosh. I mean, there's all kinds of utilization for human consciousness beyond, our little sphere, so like, and it's very interesting because this is starting to trickle out. We're starting to get a better feel for what that really looks like, and it's deep, and we probably haven't really, scratched the scratch yet. There's a lot more to come in terms of the areas of discovery, in terms of these experiences that you've had, and how they're using humans, and their attitude towards humans, and probably more importantly, well, what do we do about it? What are we supposed to do with this information? And that's, I think, I'm so happy that I was guided to choose, like, the title for the program is, why is this true? Your answer is the most important one, because the biggest threat to us, I think, is us going somewhere other than ourselves to find that answer. Like, if we go to ourselves with good intent and ask the divine realm, so to speak, for help, I mean, that's where it's very productive, things really come out that are indeed very helpful, and evidence of that is this interview. I think, really, I mean, just some of the things that you brought forth are, for me and for my little path of discovery, is very corroborating. There's a lot of stuff that, for me, that you've corroborated in terms of, how is this information useful to us? How can it help people? And you're providing some insight into this whole experiencer thing that I think gives a really good perspective.
That's a good way of putting it. An ET experiencer. That's a good way of putting it. And a little point I did want to add at the end, and this is something that has to do with the whole Sphere Being Alliance.
Okay.
Okay.
The testimony from Corey Good.
Yeah. This has to do with that. And what's interesting is there's something that correlates to my experience. So for me personally, just like what you said, I had a little communication from a telepathic communication from a bird-like being in April of 2009. And this was like right after, a couple weeks after that North Bay experience. Okay, so I was pretty fragile, and I kind of had like a divine intervention, because I was meditating, and I was, like you said, I was asking for help, like from the higher realms, like going straight up to source and being like, okay, like I need some help here. And I got this message, and I think it's okay to say now, because of what Corey Good has talked about with the sphere beings coming in and putting up the barrier around the solar system. So I don't think I'm going to risk ruining operational security by mentioning this now. But I found out about this in 2009, and I'm glad I didn't say anything before Corey Good felt it was appropriate to mention this. And it has to do with that barrier and the context of, like, why if there is a barrier, why is it there? And then why is there this barrier around the Earth and that? And this being, now they didn't say they were the Blue Avians. They didn't say they were a Sphere Being Alliance. They referred to themselves as the Aku, A-K-U, Aku. And it was a bird-like being, very angelic, and it was a dream. And he basically said that we are using volunteer starseed souls as bait. Now, I want to emphasize volunteer. So the bait volunteered to be bait, the starseeds. And the idea was we would reincarnate at this time, this century, on Earth, and attract the dark factions, and they would think like, oh, like Earth is ripe for the taking now, and then draw them in, get them to build the underground bases and fortify themselves and hunker in, because they're like, okay, we got this gem of a planet now, and boom, then the barrier goes up. And the idea is we were the bait, and it's up to us to deal with them at some point. And I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but that was the intent. And yeah. I just want to end it there. I thought that was a good place.
No, that's pretty cool. All right. So now I got to ask, do you envision us doing a follow-up at some point?
Yeah. I was thinking I would take the summer, honestly, just a couple months, take the summer to, enjoy my summer. I'm still like a normal guy, right? So I got, friends and summer plans. But it'll also be a good time because rest is just as important, if not the most important, when it comes to just bringing it back to the body. I am really into meditation and Tai Chi, and I really enjoyed Eric Rain's energy protocol, the drainage, and I've been doing that, and that's helped. And so I'm just going to focus on my body and keep my body well and reground myself this summer. And then I think in the fall, then I'll try to go back up into the mind and the spirit and try to pull things. But I'm going to enjoy my summer. And I think if I were to continue down the road I am right now, because it's been a tough 3 weeks, like bringing all this stuff, trying to work on the timeline. I admit I'm pretty stressed out. I can already feel it just a couple weeks in. And yeah, I got to take the summer if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's really important. I mean, a lot of imbalance can be created from something like this. And if you're like responding to external pressures and thinking, oh, I got to do this, and then the quality of the thing suffers, and so that's fine. And that is something that you have been working on, and it's kind of builds on itself anyway. So you have a timeline, and you start filling places in, and the more places you fill in, the more places there are to fill in, and it kind of builds on itself. So that obviously the blank slating didn't work that well in your case. So
yes and no. One cool side effect was, I can lucid dream by default. That's kind of neat.
Yeah. And you probably, but with that ability, then you could also get a lot of questions answered, I would imagine. With the intent, you could just, if there's something hanging, you could probably address it in that.
Yeah, and if we do a follow-up interview, I can kind of go into some of the positive, benevolent experiences I've had with astral beings that have already started to answer those questions, have tried to warn me about certain things. For example, like that whole interaction with the Greys this March. A couple of weeks before then, I was warned about that, and I think that's why I reacted in such a quick way, because I was kind of expecting it, and I'd been forewarned. Mm-hmm. So we can talk about those kind of astral experiences later.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, man, I really appreciate you doing this. This has been very interesting, and I really appreciate you taking the time and selecting me to do this. And my invitation stands. Whether it's sooner or later. If you want to do a follow-up, I'd be thrilled to do that with you. And so I just, I think this is great. I'm really
sure.
Happy.
And I have to thank you, by the way, seriously. Thank you for just being so nice to me and understanding. And it means a lot to be able to get this out. This was kind of like my therapy. It does give me closure on some level. Yeah. And I really do appreciate it. So thank you, Denny.
All right. Okay. Yeah. And thanks, everybody. We'll get this in the can, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Yep.